usual.
Yeah.
Good evening from Kenya, East Africa. So nice to be here yet again. Today we are so excited. We have the inaugural Journal Club subgroup called Demography Subgroup, who have a very interactive and exciting panel discussion for all of us. You have probably heard of the youth bulge, but you may not have had such a discussion to know about this demographic of the population and how it can be harnessed for development. So I'm just about to hand over the session to our moderator. My name is Joyce Wangare. I am the lead mentor at Journal Club. And I invite you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please tell us your name, institution, and what you expect from today's session. I think it would be nice to just hear from everyone. We are not so many, but in the interest of time, kindly just introduce yourselves in the chat. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over the session to Patrick. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Wangari. Welcome, everyone. Members of Journal Club and everyone who is joining for the first time. Today we have an interesting discussion on a topic that is important to Africa and this country, and that is the question of the young people. And you may have heard this question, whether young people are an asset or a liability. So our panel today is going to explore that. And I would just want to share my screen and so that I can introduce them. Just in a second. So we have two presenters today of Amandla Foundation, Amandla MAK Foundation, and she's also a human rights activist, and she also describes herself as an Afro-feminist. And then we have Michael. Michael Aima is a statistician and a demographer who has specialized in data management, statistical analysis, and survey programming in computer-assisted interviews. He has a bachelor's in applied statistics from Maseno University, and is currently a student of Master in Population Studies at the University of Nairobi, and is currently working for Remit Kenya that consults on different projects. For instance, the World Bank consultancies on social and economic impacts of COVID-19 among Kenyan host populations and refugees. So that's the panel.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, are you already sharing screen? Because I was looking for it. Or
no, I had stopped sharing the screen.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for the intro.
Because,
you may proceed. Okay. I was not sure what was going on. Okay.
I had to pull up the introduction from somewhere else. So
okay.
I'm now going to share my screen and introduce the session once again. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Great. So that's the topic for today: population and development, and how we can harness Kenya's demographics into dividends. And I've just introduced the speakers, the panel. That is Emma and Michael. And just to move forward, you may have heard people asking whether we are overpopulated or not. Now, we need to answer this question. We'll try to answer this question in this session. And we'll also get to understand how human populations grow and whether young people are an asset or a liability, and how we can actually utilize, how we can convert the potential of the young people from the liability that they may have been viewed as into an asset. So I would like to invite the presenters, the first presenter, Michael, to just let us know what is this jargon we hear about, but he will make it simple, don't worry. Michael, tell us, what do we need to know before we get deeper into the discussion? What are some of the key things that we need to understand?
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for the introduction and also for doing the opening remarks. So I'll start by introducing and helping the audience understand some of the terminologies we're going to use in this presentation. Now that not everyone will be is a demographer. So the first one here is the demographic dividend. So demographic dividend is a period of accelerated economic growth usually arise from a change of a country's population structure. And this usually happens because there is a decline in fertility and mortality rates. So when births in a country reduce and also mortality rates reduce, this period of accelerated economic growth is likely to come in, because when we have very many young people and when we have very many people dying because of various issues, disease and such like things, it becomes a burden economically. So the other thing which I'm going to define here is dependency. So dependency is a ratio of is a ratio. Itself is a ratio, and it measures the ratio of the number of dependents to the total working age population in a country or region. So there is an age group which is usually the working age, and this is usually 15 years to 60 years, for example, in our country. So children are normally not allowed to work, and that's below the age of 15 at least. Then the elderly are the people who have retired. So when we take the ratio of the people who are working versus the ones who, the total population, that's when we find the dependence ratio. These are the people who depend on those who are in productive activities. So the next term I'm going to define here is total fertility. Now, total fertility is the total number of children a woman could give birth to if she was to experience the current birth rates by the end of a reproductive period. So what do we mean here? The reproductive period for women is 15 to 49 years. And along the way, there are various proportions of people who are giving birth, and they always differ from maybe the young people. Maybe the birth rates are very low among the women. In 20 years, they start increasing. The 30 years, the proportion of those who are like to give birth increases. Over that period of time, demographers can estimate, for example, currently in Kenya, if a woman experiences the current fertility rate, how many children is she likely to give birth? For example, our country, today, the current total fertility rate is 3.4 children. This means, on average, currently women are likely to give birth to 3 children at least, if the current birth rates continue. The next term I'm going to define is the median age. Now, the median age is age that divides the total population into numerically, that is. So the first half is the younger people, and the next half is the older people. Currently for Kenya, the median age is 20 years. And this also helps us to see whether do we have very many young people or do we have very many old people. And so it's just a measure for us to see how youthful our population is, for example. And you can see Kenya's population is youthful from the 20 years that our current median age in the country. Next one is replacement fertility. Replacement level fertility is the fertility in which if parents give birth to such a number of children, then they replace themselves. So a couple is normally 2 people. So if they are to replace themselves, they'll give birth to children, but the ratio is usually 2.1. So this is usually the target level of fertility for any country. So a country like Kenya, which I've already said our current total fertility is 3.4, is really trying to find ways in which it can go to replacement 2.1. However, as we learn, time is that this figure is very hard to reach because the moment we get there, we just continue down, leading to a population decline among the natives of such a country. We have countries in the global north. Don't know what they call them, global north or developed countries, because most of them are really struggling. And China is among those who are now struggling. Russia is struggling. So these countries have fertility levels below 2. So when it's below 2, you can be sure people are declining in that country. It's happening in other countries. Last, I'm going to mention here is the age structure. The age sex structure or population pyramids. And there's a time when we shall show you some of these population pyramids. So a population pyramid usually, basically is a bar graph that on the 2 sides has male and female. So you can see how men and women are distributed in a particular population. And it also has age groups from the young, right from 0 up to the maximum age group above 75 years. So we'll come to a point that we'll see some of these graphs. Okay. Now the next thing, I think my next, my colleague will take up.
Yeah, I want at this point just to ask you something. Michael, this demographic dividend, have we achieved it as a country, the demographic dividend?
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for the question. As I mentioned, from my definition of what a demographic dividend is, it's a period of accelerated economic growth. So if we as a country experience this accelerated economic growth, and then we will experience this demographic dividend. This is because this demographic dividend is not automatic. As a country, we need to do something in order to benefit from it. If we have the age, the population that is ready and ripe for us to reap the benefits of demographic dividend, then we need to do something to harness this population. This is the youth, the people who are in the production age period, 15 to 64 years. So we need to ask ourselves, as a country, what are we doing or what have we done to benefit from this chance of accelerated economic growth? Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I look forward to hearing exactly how we can make use of the youth. I think if you live in Kenya, you know how the young people are used as goons during the electioneering period. But what we are saying is that we need some better use of our youth beyond political violence. And but before we get there on how we can make use of the young people, I would like us to have some key statistics from the relevant sources, such as the KNBS and others. And at this point, I would like to call in Aima to give some remarks.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like to say is that when we look at youth, we cannot exhaustively generalize. Yeah. So what will help us put things into perspective is looking at things from an intersectionality point of view, where if we are looking at the youth, we look at the youth, we engender the statistics, and then we look at those with disability, we look at the youth in rural areas versus, you know, those in the urban centers, because the dynamics of the youth in these spaces is different. You know, and as we look at solutions, we need to factor the dynamic aspect of it, of the different youth in different places. We also need to note and appreciate the fact that when the working population, at least 30% of the adult population, which normally translates to the dominant population being majority in the working age group, while those of the dependents is less, then we realize demographic dividend. Yeah. So in Kenya, we are privileged, or rather we are lucky to be in that category where we have more people who are not dependents, which I think it's between the age of 60 something and above is just 4%. So this creates an opportunity for, you know, faster growth, and as a result, economic development is realized, as you know, Michael has shared. And in the majority of our population, where we have more, you know, select few who are empowered, there's a great imbalance, and these results to, you know, wastage of human capital that could be capitalized for a country to realize, you know, economic development. So I don't know if you would, Patrick, if you would share the screen, so then I look at the characteristics of Kenya's population according to the 2019 census, and how many young people we have educated, unemployed, and the poverty rates.
I have the education slide on.
Great. So the total population of Kenya, which can read and write, is at 78%, where the data was got from the 2019 census shows that we have 3.3 million people who attended pre-primary and 10 million people who attended primary school, 3.4 million people who attended secondary school, and then we have 500,000 people who attended mid-level college, ending with 471 people who attended university. Yeah, so no, Michael, please go back still, back. Let's go. No, next slide now. Yeah, great. So in the 2019 population, we have 47,564,296 people, and this is an increase from the 2009 census, you know, from which Kenyan population was 38.6 million inhabitants. And even though we realize, or we have realized, an increase of about, you know, 9 million in people, or rather in population growth, that we have also realized a reduction to about 2.2% as compared to population growth rate of over 3% from 1979. So we have the key statistics as the age group in Kenya of 0 to 14 years as being 39.03%, 15 to 24 years as being 19.61%, 25 to 54 years, that is 34 4.27%, and then 55 to 64 years, 4%, and above 65 years, that is 33.08. So when you total from the age of 15 to 24 to 55 to 64 years, this is what cumulatively adds to the working population, which the country can use to harness potential to ensure economic growth, especially if we have equal distribution of resources, we have equal opportunities, and we develop the areas that have been neglected. So yeah, that is it. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Emma, for that. I just want us to shift gears back to Michael, because we need to understand how this growth can happen, actually how the population grows, and later on contextualize it in the case of Kenya. So Michael, tell us, how do we get to these levels where we have 40, it should now be about 50 million people since the 2019 census. How do we get there? How do populations really grow? And what we'll see later, whether anything can be done and the soundness of things that can be done to better manage population. Michael.
Thank you, Patrick. And as I come back, remember one of our initial questions was, are we overpopulated? And how do we know whether we are overpopulated? To answer that question, and for us also to reflect together as a group, is that I'll take you to the beginning. Beginning is that of the beginning of our demography. Demography, is the study of humans, and so that's why we are talking more about people here. Now, where did demography start? There is a British man called Thomas Malthus, who lived in the 18th century, and he wrote letters about population. And his hypothesis was that his name is Thomas Malthus, and the letters he wrote was called an essay on principles of population, and that's where this field started from. Now, in his essay, he said that the rate at which population grows is at a geometric rate. A geometric rate, or you can see from the screen here, we have displayed a graph, and this graph is a logistic graph. Sorry for those terms, but at least you can see how the graph looks like and how it goes. So this is how we expect population to grow. And at first it starts very slow, and then it goes very steep. And this steepness does not really seem to have an end. Very steep. And so Thomas said that the rate at which population grows, we really need to do something. Of course, it cannot be sustainably, it cannot work. When you look at how food is being produced, it's being produced at a rate we call a geometric rate, and an arithmetic rate, an addition, but population grows at a multiplication rate, like 3 times 3 times 3, like that. Food is the productivity of food is at a very low level compared to how population is growing. So that's how we even came up with principles of trying to reduce population growth, have family planning, contraceptives, and everything to really help ourselves from getting into trouble. So there are 3 things which help population to grow. First one is fertility. And the most emphasis is usually on the fertility aspect, as I've mentioned, based on even where demography started from the fear that we might be in a crisis in the short term in the future. The next thing is mortality. Mortality is people dying. people are born, there is also people dying. So mortality, especially for infants, is usually very high in developing countries, and it's very low in developed countries. So you realize that the age at which you expect people to die, we call it life expectancy, is low for poor countries, but for rich countries, it's actually high. So people don't die much. And when people don't die much, one of the reasons why people give birth to children, like 8 children, 7 children, and we'll come there, we'll show you some of the graph of where Kenya has come from. Families could have children, even 10, and we know that from our grandparents, is that it's like some form of insurance. Let me give birth to 10 children, because maybe half of them can only survive. And that's where we come from. Now, when we have few people dying, mortality levels being low, then population stands a chance of growing. Then finally, we have migration. So these three aspects, fertility, mortality, and migration, there are three major parts that make up the field of demography. So people can migrate to a country, and that will increase the population of that country, or people can migrate out of a country, and that will reduce the population of that country. So we have a small equation here for those who don't mind the equations, that the total population at any given time will be equal to initial population. So maybe the population now in mid here will be equal to population at the beginning of the year, plus those who have been born. That's the natural increase. That will be, of course, the net. Those who have been born minus those who have died, that will amount to the natural increase. That's the net migration. Net migration also, here we are talking about the people who have migrated in the country, immigrants, minus those who have migrated out of the country. That's called immigration. And that will amount now to population at any given time. And from this we can calculate the population growth and as well as the population growth rate. And these are the things which we are going to see whether whatever Malthus was saying is true. Is population growing at a geometric rate? So we'll come to see that as we continue in this presentation and even beyond. And now, sorry, back a little bit before we move. Let me mention something about demographic transition theory. Now, this is all countries start from poverty, even those which are developed currently, even the G8. There was at one time, it might be several centuries, that's where they started from. Now, demographic transition means that there is a pattern populations take from when people are in poverty levels to when people become middle class income country, and when people become a developed country. And these are very evident in these demographic features we have talked about: fertility, mortality, and migration. So we all start from very high fertility levels and very high mortality levels. And once people receive education and we start having a reduction in mortality, then there is no reason of giving birth to 10 children. That's the next phase. This reduce, we have a reduction in fertility and mortality. And then finally, we now experience a very large population of age as compared to the youth. So we'll show you some graphs that really demonstrate this demographic transition, where Kenya, or where the developed countries started from, where Kenya is, and where the developed countries are. We're going to see this in some illustrations as we proceed. Thank you. Now we can see how population in Kenya has been growing since 1969, when we were only 10 million. And you can see it has been growing at a steep. You look at that curve, if you were to draw a line, at least you can see how it goes up to I think this was 2019 or so when we were 47 million. And so this gives you a picture. So if nothing happens, you can really expect it to continue growing. Now, the next one here, now this is very interesting. Look at fertility. And 1960, we started with an average of every woman in Kenya giving birth to 8 children. So you can imagine that if that was today, we are 47 million and every family gives birth to 8 children, where we might end up. So this is the lower side of, that's where, when we remember I mentioned about a demographic, what do we call it? The transition theory, where it starts from. Very high levels of fertility. So as every woman is giving birth to 8 children, most of them end up dying. They never survive. And that's why you find that in 1960, we were only 10 million. So despite the very high birth rate, population wasn't high because of the high death rates, especially infants and the whole general population. Find even the life expectancy was also very low at that time. And so since 1960, our fertility rate in Kenya has been declining. And as you can see, currently we are at 3.4. That's currently where we are. We are no longer at 8. And now, if fertility is declining, the question is population declining? The answer is no, because we are now 47 million compared to 1960 when we were only 10 million. And that's why our population keeps on increasing. And that's why you find that governments are keen in saying that let's try to have a replacement level of fertility. Now here is a population pyramid. Remember we mentioned the population pyramid, and now you can have a view of what a population pyramid is. And you can see it's on one side we have the females, and on one side we have the males. And then when you look at this, you realize that the lower age group of 0 to 4 in Kenya has started to decline. Normally this should be the largest, but as of now, it has started to decline. So when we have, when we started at 1960, you could expect that one to be the largest one that is shown. But now it has started to decline. Maybe we can show you the next one of Japan in 1950, and then you can have a better view of it. So when you look at Japan, this was 1950, and as I told you, Japan is a developed country, but all countries were usually experience this particular trend in terms of demography. So where we have the 0 to 4 to be the highest population in the country, and then it's a V-shaped as you move higher in terms of Japan. This is where Kenya was many years ago, and now you can see it's beginning to change. And as it changes, this is now the very period we have of a demographic dividend period. And policymakers and all of us Kenyans have a responsibility of wondering, how can we harness this demographic dividend that is coming? Because in the next few years, when we become a developed country, you can now move to the next one. This is now Japan in the most recent time. You can see the greatest population is the elderly people. The children are now fewer. You remember the fertility that was declining, it kept on declining, and it meant that now it comes a point, children are really few who are being born to the population. And at this point now, this is developed countries that have reached at this point, governments find themselves in a difficult situation because parents are giving birth to maybe 1 children, 2, like Russia currently is about 1.5. So here is a threat, the population is declining. We have China experiencing the same, very low birth rates, below replacement. Remember, we mentioned replacement, they are below replacement. And now they try to raise this fertility because it becomes a threat. The country population is declining. So one of the options that the countries come up with is migration. Now, migration becomes very crucial to a country. They encourage migration into the country and discourage migration out of the country. And now, this is how population grows. This is where Kenya is headed. As you can see, Japan in 2016. This is where developed countries are. And we are saying before we get into this period, how can we utilize our period of a demographic dividend? Patrick, back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was insightful. We feel like we are also becoming population scientists. This is quite good stuff, I think. But now we want to come to the practicalities. How can we make use of the population, the youthful population that we have? And I would like to bring in Aima, but before that, there are things I really needed to us to ask ourselves. For example, at the top of my mind is the National Youth Policy. What is really happening? Today we tried to invite someone from the National Council for Population and Development, the NCPD, the body that is charged with the crafting the population policy, but they were unable to attend. But we need to ask ourselves these questions. What is the state of the National Youth Policy? Do we have one yet? I had seen a draft some years ago. I don't know whether it's been passed. I remember during the campaigns for the new constitution, we were to have something called the National Youth Council. I don't know whether it is still there. I don't know whether it's functional. What is happening, Aima? How can we go about utilizing the youth bulge that we have in our country?
Okay, great. So before I, look at how to harness Kenya's youth to, take care of or sustain our economic growth, and before I look at the National Youth Policy, I'd like to add to what Michael had stated on overpopulation. And I'd like to state that we, as Kenya, we don't have an overpopulation issue. The issue we have is that we have some areas that are overpopulated, while others are not. Others are scarcely populated, and the reason is because people move to Nairobi, Mombasa, or Kisumu for greener pastures. So we need to find a way of decentralizing economies and grow areas that are considered marginalized, or the places that people call ushago, to get more people to move in those places. So then we are able to decongest the cities, like Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nairobi, because we don't have resilient infrastructure. Look at places like Kibera, we have very bad housing. Demand and supply is overstretched. Land is overstretched because it has to be divided into smaller pieces to cater for the population issues. If you look at even the size houses in Nairobi compared with places like Kisii, you get that a very small house that goes for 20,000 does not compare a house that goes for 9,000 in Kisii. Yeah? We also have rivers and forests being cut, to get people more land, leading to, the forest coverage going to as low as 3%. The rivers are affected. For example, Mombasa River, which is slowly drying up because their so small ranges is not in existence anymore. Yeah, we also have climate change, which has been adversely affected in Kenya, and this is due to sand mining and stuff like that. So as much as we would like to say that in Kenya we have an overpopulation issue, this is not really our issue. So back to your question, Patrick, on National Youth Policy. We have one that is not inclusive, if I may put it that way, because you'll get that for you to access funding, you have to have something like either logbook, or you need to have a title deed. So when we look at the youth in Kenya, sincerely, how many have or can access or already have like a vehicle they can give that logbook for them to get, capital and stuff. So as much as we have policy in place, it is not policy that is inclusive. It is not policy that caters for the common mwananchi. So we need to revise policy, and policymakers need to address these imbalance that we are seeing, and to face the fact that we have very many unemployed youth. Remember, for any person who has gone through campus, most of them graduate already with a deficit. They have help loans and stuff like that. So imagine now overstretching this person and denying this person an opportunity until they are able to, I don't know, do what. Already the job application process is exhausting, and it takes a lot of money. You need to have money to, photocopy the CV, transport to get them delivered and stuff like that. So we need to have policymakers take care of that. As much as we have good policies, they are not practical to especially the Kenyan youth and stuff. So we also need to look at education, because we have people we have 78% of the youth in Kenya can write. They have basic literacy level. And then we also have those who are educated. However, policy only caters for those who have gone to school. So then they get to employment and stuff. And when you look at even TVET, you need to have attained a certain grade. We don't have, what we need rather as Kenya is to look at those who are literate, basic literacy levels, but then do not have the papers or have not graduated and stuff. But then how can we help them to be skillful? Because we have skills that one doesn't need so much education. And I'm sorry if this might sound, might be unsettling to, some people, but things like mechanics, if you want to study mechanics, you only need the basic literacy to be literate, rather know how to write and to speak and to do basic calculation and stuff like that. So we need to also have policy makers taking care of these. Unemployment is so high as well, and the poverty rates. And until education, unemployment, and poverty rates are catered for, then we will still have policy, but then with an imbalance. So back to the question, how can we harness Kenya's youth to at least realize economic growth? So the first thing we can do is highlighting the skills supply. What skills, because there's a very big mismatch. We have so many people going for BCom, so many people going in for different courses that look posh, law, medicine is necessary skills that we really, really, really need. So we need to have a skill supply match in terms of we have more youth, rather youth equally distributed. So then it doesn't get to a point where we are lacking some skills because we have so many youth who don't have jobs, because it's like all of them got concentrated to, one course or a course that looked or sounded posher than other courses. I don't subscribe to that, but then, that's the mindset on the ground. So we also need to look at unemployment and underemployment among the youth. We have so many people who have done degrees, but what they're practicing is totally different from what they studied. Yeah, and we also have those who are qualified, they have papers, but then they are underemployed and underpaid. Yeah, so we also need to look at that. We need to look at existing opportunities and creating opportunities that we need, for the youth of Kenya. The government also needs to deepen human capital base. Instead of looking at human beings as human resource, we need to look at human beings as human capital, people who generate income for economic growth, as opposed to people who get the work done. Yeah, the quality of education And this quality of education needs to be relevant to targeted sectors with the highest growth potential to enable the country address the youth unemployment as is. Because we have youth who are studying stuff that they're not coming to use outside here. Yeah, we have degrees that, well, you study, yes, they sound nice and all, but then outside here, there are no jobs. So what is the point? So all that needs to be revised. We need to embark on realizing the demographic dividend as well. And we need to have youth mainstreamed in all government ministries. So as much as having a youth ministry is a good thing, but then can we have youth programs catered for in all ministries? Yeah, and then now we have like the gap we have and that we are seeing with the youth catered for. We need to also hold the ministries, especially youth ministries, accountable with youth funds, with the resources that they get. Because as much as things are done, look nice on paper, as much as we have good policies, are they being realized? Is this the truth on the ground? Because on paper, things look good, but then as we all say, kwa ground vitu ni different, right? So we also need to look at skill development. So we have a very hardworking youth, but access to capital or access to credit is close to zero. Yeah. How do we develop the skills of the youth? Do we have like courses where they can develop their skills further and stuff like that? And we also need to address the issues of failing businesses, because I'll give an example of Mumias, because I come from somewhere near here. When Mumias went down, we saw so many people, going out of the workforce, and these many people are the youth. So we also need to have that catered for, that as institutions go down, what are we doing, or rather what is the government doing to ensure that these people either have a different skill set that will place them somewhere else, that they will be earning money in return, doing what? Getting more money, and essentially adding to, or rather contributing to economic growth. We also have so many youth in the rural areas, youth who are not, for lack of a better word, who are underutilized, and youth who don't have opportunities. So we have people in the rural areas, they have land, yes, they have everything they need, but that land is just lying there. And in a case, let me give an example of Kisii. I come from Kisii. We have so many youth with borders. I don't know who came up with this idea of having all the youth have borders. So if you've gone to school up to, I think, class 8 or Form 4, and you can ride a motorbike, they get you a motorbike. So we have so many motorbikes in the town, and I feel this is not the best way that we could, utilize or take care of our youth. Because if we could have those who did exemplary well, and they did not have money to go to schools, taken care of in terms of they identify tech-related courses they get to do, because nowadays people make money online. Yeah. So if we could find a way of taking care of our youth, we would harness Kenya's youth to ensure that we have one that grows exponentially, not one that does well between these years to this year, and then we have like a serious decline. Then we are not doing justice to the country and also to the youth and generations that come after. So yeah, Patrick, that's it. Over to you. Patrick, you're muted. Yeah. Wangari.
Patrick, can you hear us? Patrick? I've sent Patrick a prompt to unmute. So let's see.
Maybe I can
Okay, welcome.
mention something as Patrick. Yeah, but not for me when he's back. So just as we are doing this presentation, as you know, when most of us have done this, sometimes when you are in school, you might not be doing very well, and then you realize your colleagues are doing better. So what you do, you just try to learn how they're doing it. And as we have mentioned, even as a country, that's exactly maybe what we need to do. Perhaps we might not expect the leaders to do it, but even us in our small ways, because for sure that the countries in the East, the Eastern countries, the Western countries, they have been through where we are. And most of them, it's because they have taken advantage of this particular window of product. And even now, they are doing much more better. As COVID came, countries like Singapore have dormitories of workers. These are migrant workers. They so much need people, and they have imported them from our countries. In the near future, our countries will also be in the same situation. And we also have countries very active with migration, encouraging people to migrate to their countries, like Canada. I was saying, like 80% of the people, of the percentage growth in population in Canada came from migration. So for us, we don't need to migrate people, we have them. Maybe we need to do something as a country.
Thank you, Michael. At this point, thank you, Michael and Emma, so much. But at this point, I would like to invite someone else with a different perspective. And this is an academic, but he also does practical work with the organ agencies, I believe. He teaches at JQuat. He teaches statistical modeling, and this is something quite close to demography. And so I'd like to invite Professor Joseph Kyalo to give remarks on how possibly we can move forward in terms of harnessing the youth bulge.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
What I found interesting is that the topic has been well articulated. Maybe I can just introduce myself. You introduced me pretty well. My name is Joseph Mong'ute, and coincidentally, I'm the current elected national chair of the Kenya National Statistical Society. And I remember last year when, not last year, but in 2019 when we had our census, there was the first report that was released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. We had a number of people who came out to dispute the results, saying that our region should be this much, that much, and all that. Simply because our leaders understand the powers in the numbers. Cases in point, people, maybe I remember a case in point, even the governor of Tharaka Nithi once said that he's going to file a case to dispute the numbers. But the reason why the numbers were the way they were is because you've put it clearly that populations are actually determined by fertility, mortality, and also migration. But again, this was the first time when we were actually having our population being counted under the new dispensation of the county arrangement. So I believe everyone was able to be convinced by the numbers that we saw. And I remember I issued a statement in one of the medias.
Are you still speaking, Prof?
We call the demographic dividend, and the sooner we pick this and move with it, the better, because there are countries that are grappling with workforce that is aged. You've talked of countries that are importing people, and coincidentally, such countries are actually having a weighty bill on medication, because the more aged population you have, the more conditions that you get that are related in our health. So the trick here is to maintain a population which is replacing itself naturally. And when the population is replacing itself naturally, then you don't run into issues of population imbalance. I want to quote a case in point in China. China, they have been having what we call the one-child policy. And now they want to review that. Actually, discussions are at high level, and they're reviewing the one-child policy to allow couples actually have 3 children. And this is because, not that there are few, you all know that China is the most populous nation on earth, one nation on earth, and they still want to have more children. The secret lies under the dividends that you get. So I don't think I have much to add, only that there are a number of things that probably have been highlighted. And what I would like to encourage is that as we move forward in sensitizing our leaders, our policymakers, and all that, because much of what requires to be done should actually be done at the policy level. So this kind of advocacy that we are doing in trying to, first of all, understand the benefits of having a population that is replacing itself naturally, and you know that has a lot of benefits in it. One of the things that probably maybe we need to do is to have such discussions and escalate them even to higher levels. And these are discussions that, first of all, when you get the knowledge, then our leaders will make decisions from a point of knowledge. So I think I would like to probably maybe request if there are any questions that probably we could I could take, because on this matter somebody can talk and talk and talk. I would like to go to the chat, if Patrick, you allow me, so that probably I can check any question or clarification that you could be having, because
Yes.
the speakers who are taking us through the painstakingly, we had Emma, we had Michael, and Patrick himself. They did really a good job explaining each point. And if I start emphasizing this, I will not just be repeating. So I would like to go to the chat and probably maybe check some of the questions for clarification that the audience may be wanting to hear. So
Thank you.
I'm just checking. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. As you check that, maybe we can also open up the floor to anyone who has a question. And I just realized that I've not been having my camera on all this time, and the way I've been smiling, so that all that has gone to the waste, but that's fine. I need to just open up the floor to see whether there is anyone who has a question or a comment or a compliment as we wait for Prof to check the questions. I think I've seen 1 or 2 comments there. Any question?
Yeah, maybe as they prepare to have their questions, I'm seeing a question here on, please comment on the nation being a net importer of skills while our youth remain largely unemployed and employed. I think the skills that are actually imported into this country most of them come through the multinationals. And I think, as I said, some of these issues need to come at the policy level, because most of the key skills, actually, most of the skills that that are imported into the country are due to multinationals who invest in the country, and part of their bargain is also to employ the people they have come along with. So if we can have this at policy level, that there are some skills that we really have here in the country, even if it's a multinational company that is coming in, they can be given other benefits like tax relief, but they create employment to our youth. That can really help. There's somebody else, Isaiah says we need to have placement opportunities. Ibrahim member is saying that in some fields, remember the same spirit, the same Kenya exports massive skills too. So what I've just said is that we can just have at policy level having these multinationals being sensitized on some of the things. I know there are countries where you cannot export certain skills even if you own a company. So I think this is what requires to be solidified in the country. Then there is somebody, Aurela Munene says we need to promote trend and minimize aid dependence. That I agree to that. And while still I agree on promoting trend and minimizing aid dependency, I also add that we need to actually focus on production. And production means we look at anything that produces either tangible or intangible resources, and that can really be a matter of much importance. So you also say that we do have countries in Africa making strides in utilizing.
I don't think we can hear you properly, Prof.
I think
you are very faint.
What I would say, Monene, is that the countries that are making the best of their population are those that really support their workforce with the better policies. Their population. You mentioned that there are countries that you cannot just take in skill. I don't want to name some of them, but if you remember, we have been having a lot of tussles even in East Africa from some of our neighbors. I don't want to name them in name, but simply because there are some things that they cannot allow. Even if it's a Kenyan going there, they'll tell you that please, we have this, and it is actually well protected. So again, liberalization has actually worsened the situation, because you want to interdepend on your neighbors and all that. And there are some things, gives and takes, that you really have to balance. So I would say that we have countries in Africa that have really put policies in place, especially policies of protection of what they have, so that it's not infiltrated by outsiders. Of course, that is not bad, but again, it has to be done in moderation. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Michael. And since I cannot find any other question, and we are actually beyond our time, I would like to ask Wangari to say something about Journal Club and probably close the session. Wangari?
Patrick, sorry.
I see Emma's hand is up. I think we can allow her because she's one
Yes,
of our
right.
panelists. Emma, welcome.
Yeah. So I'd like to just add that, we are a country which treats symptoms instead of looking at the real disease and going to treat that disease. In terms of when we're looking at family planning, we look at how can we have family planning medicine to everyone instead of looking at how can we enlighten the youth so then they make better decisions. Now, when we are also looking at skills, instead of looking at let us outsource and then we teach our youth, how about we identify those skills we don't have as a country and look at how we can harness the youth we have to getting to know those skills. Because as much as we keep firefighting and waiting for the fire, so then we look for fire extinguisher, we are not going to get anywhere until we realize that this is what causes the fire and this is how we are going to prevent this fire. And just in case the fire comes up, this is how we are going to put it off and put it off for good. Not how are we going to stock more fire extinguishers and teach more firemen so then they are able to put off these fires just in case anytime they ignite. So let's be a country that treats the real cause, the real looks at the real problem. Let's not look to treat and solve symptoms, because then we are not doing anything. Thank you.
I really like that analogy of the firemen and going upstream to resolving the core problem rather than the surface symptoms. We were very honored to have our guests, panelists, as well as our in-house member, moderator. This is a refreshing approach in Journal Club, where in our subgroups, we can design a session just like this for 1 hour and have a very riveting discussion. Today's discussion has taught me a lot, and I believe all of us here have also grown in and expanded in our understanding and in our application of this topic today. So mine is just to thank everybody. And tomorrow we resume with our Shut Up and Write session. This is our individual study time session where we do our writing and then we announce to the group optionally, what we have been able to accomplish. So our Journal Club group, oh, I see our founder Aurelia Monene is here. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to say something, you are welcome. She says, thank you very much, panelists, moderators, and discussants. So I appreciate you all. Aurelia, do you want to speak so we can hear you?
I'm not in a very good position too, but thank you. Really, really, that was very engaging, and we hope we can also have that in our research as we reflect on our various topics, because I think it matters. Population things matters even in our own research papers and in our own work. Thank you.
Yes, today the demographers have it. You guys were amazing. Thank you so much and have a good evening.